Cozza on April 21st. This is Michael Cozza interviewing John Cozza on April 21st, 2001.
France, where we were.
Okay.
They were on the Lorient River. It looked like a real dog, but I got my reference stick up against his face. It was a classic dog. And these are all photos. This one I went for was Zurich, Switzerland. These are not in order. Grandma put them together. Right. Zurich and Davos, Switzerland. I went there skiing one winter of 1945.
So, you were on furlough then?
Yeah, got a 1 week furlough in Switzerland. And now here I am. I never skied in my life. I'm trying to ski. I'm trying to break my legs so I can stay there. This was Ulm, France. Ulm, Germany, where we had what they call constabulary duty. After the war ended, they took the people from all the outfits that were there.
Okay.
And they put us on constabulary duty, which is like the state police in various cities.
All right.
And we were in Ulm, Germany. Now, this is the Munster Cathedral. See how beautiful it is?
Yeah.
It's the oldest cathedral in Europe, the tallest spire in Europe, and all around it, devastation. It was bombed right to the ground, but the cathedral stood because the Americans rebound in the daytime,
Yeah.
and the British bombed at nighttime.
Okay.
But they always dropped flares so they can see where the cathedral is. We did in daytime, so we could see where it was. And it's still standing as of today.
Wow.
And the spire, this is about 500 feet tall. And there's a stairway going all the way up. And my buddy and I, maybe I'll see his picture here later. Bob Ralph from St. Louis. Here's a good picture of the Munster Cathedral. I don't see a picture of Bob Ralph. I've got this thing at home. I didn't think you wanted to bring it to school. They might kick you out. I think you're a Nazi.
Yeah.
This is, when we went to, this is in Ulm, Germany. When we went there, we were given orders to, well, here's a house here. We call it Stevens Hotel. I was up there. This is in the winter of 1995, 1945.
So let's just say goodbye to you because he's going to go
Goodbye.
back on.
Hey, goodbye.
If I don't get back.
Where you going?
I'm going on a bike trip.
Oh. Where they have bike trail?
No.
No, he's going to his friend's house.
Go
We're just
around.
giving him a haircut just in case.
See you, Joe.
Yeah.
We got this whole block of houses that are opposite the door. The war was over. We didn't want to spend the winter living in tents like we had been doing. As we moved, we always had our tents.
All right.
So we took over this whole block. The people we gave them notice 2 days to get out, leave. The only thing we wanted to leave behind was the unstuffed furniture, the tables, chairs, bookcases. Take all their belongings, take all their personal stuff, just so we had billets. And I marked that off. That was my room up here. Okay. I was a company clerk, actually. I was running the company at the time. But that was in the winter of 45. It's the same year I went to on my furlough. We're standing in front of the house. Is what these. Right here, see the Stevens Hotel.
Okay.
And it's like the Stevens Hotel in Chicago. So we got the names. This is when I went to Belgium. We went for some trip. I forget what it was. We got armored vehicles. When we turned the tanks in, we got armored cars. This is the Autobahn in Germany, which is similar to our interstates.
Okay.
When the war ended, Eisenhower was the commander-in-chief, during the ETO operation. And he got the idea for this. Hitler he was a brilliant man, really.
Yeah.
He got we got to build these highways, move our tanks from one end to the other, depending where we want to go. And they had these super highways long before anyone even thought of it. And here it shows Stuttgart this way, Munich that way. Ulm was in between these two. It was on the Danube River. music in it. Bob Ryan. There's Bob Ryan.
Okay.
Yeah, he is mine. I was telling you about. Actually, this is Heidelberg, but they call it I got a picture here. What's that? Are you recording?
Yeah.
He is on the way to your house. Okay.
Here's another picture of home with all the devastation around the church. It's amazing how the bombers were so accurate at that. Here, oh, this is an old German street car.
Okay.
And I had another. When we went into Ulm, Germany, Mrs. Her name was Schultz, owned that building that we were in, and she spoke a little English. I spoke a little German at that time. You know, when you're with the German people, you learn the basics, and she and I were able to converse occasionally. And here it was Christmas time coming up, and we had moved in and took over that whole block of homes.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Schultz owned our building, and I apologized to her for, what we had to do. She said, Sergeant, no problem. You should be home with your family at Christmas time. It's our fault that this war took place. And she says that I know you will take care of my home for me. It was a 3-story deal, and it was actually our company headquarters. Because I was the clerk sergeant at that time. It was my testimony. And she said, all I would like to do is to come here once a week to clean. And that way she's checking up on the house.
Right.
And she had, the stairs were oak, and they were not finished. They were white. She was German people were very clean. And she says, just if I can come here once a week, I says, okay. I says, but we will give you the soap. Because they didn't have any soap. And they had some pretty, it's like Stampers, these bar soap. And when she finished cleaning, she still had half the bottle. You can have that. And she just thought that was the world because nobody had soap. And naturally, all the guys, they gave her some food and stuff.
Right.
But it was sad, thinking that here you are kicking her out of her house. But it worked out. Then we moved down. Then from there, we went to Schwabisch Hall, which was in Germany also. Here we have one of the big gimmicks. When the war is over, I think the hierarchy just thinks of nothing but parades and pomp and everything else. And this was over at one of the airfields. And we stood here, it was in July.
Okay.
They woke us up at 2 o'clock in the morning to get out to go to the parade grounds at the field and line up all the equipment. This was the Zone Constabulary Force. We no longer had tanks. These were tanks. Now this might not be with this series of pictures. We turned into the tanks. The tanks had tracks on,
Yeah.
and we had armored cars. That might be, no, that's not an armored car. They're probably over in here.
Okay.
And armored cars had great big wheels on them, but they were still armored in case you got shot at or whatever. And they're fast moving. We would go out on one night. They came to and put a white towel on the cots of all the sergeants, and they told us about they're going to wake us up at 1 o'clock in the morning, and then we had to go on a raid in some town where there was some kind of espionage stuff going on with the Russians, and it was under the auspices of the OSS. Now they call it the CIA. But we went into this town at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and there's a certain building on a circle. We had the instructions, you go to this door, we go to that. We hit the doors, we got them out of there, And the OSS took them away. We don't know what happened. And they went back to, we're back in
Back in
bed
bed?
before the other guys got up. But that was the sort of thing that the zone constabulary was doing, because there still was a lot going on, between the factions. We, the U.S. Army, could have gone into Berlin first,
Okay.
but they didn't. They got orders to hold back and let the Russians go in, because the Russians, they had they lost millions of people during the war. Stalingrad and what have you, they had those big sieges going on, and they figured, well, they deserved to go in first. And they went in. That's how we got involved with that Berlin deal, where they split up the whole city and all that. It was a sour point with all of them that we were the ones who really broke the war open by hitting the beaches and going through France and then going into Germany and heading for Berlin, but that didn't work out that way. This is Schwabisch Hall, Germany,
All right.
where we had moved with the zone constabulary for a while after Ulm. And this is a bridge over the Danube River. I wanted to show you one picture that I had here, which that's Erwin Rommel's grave.
Who's he?
General Rommel?
Yeah.
He was a desert fox. You heard me mention George Patton, who was the head of the 1st Armored Division.
Okay.
He was our tank commander. He was our tank expert.
Okay.
And Patton fought against Rommel in Africa
Okay.
and chased him out of Africa. Actually, he got back to Germany, but this was him. And the word is that he was killed. He didn't die. They said he died of a Jeep accident, but one of their armored cars or one of their vehicles, sort of like our Jeep. But this is in Hurlingen, Germany. And incidentally, George Patton died in a weapons carrier accident, supposedly accidentally. And we always had our doubts about that.
Wow.
But we celebrated when he died, which sounds bad, but he was such a stickler. The war was over, and we still had to go around with shirt and hair. We had to dress up all the time. Everyone else is casual, but his outfits had to be spit and polished. Just like he's going to have another war next week or something. And he and his driver going down the Autobahn or something, and they had an accident. Like the Explorer vehicles are doing these days. But it gives you an idea of what kind of billets we... Here's an armored car.
Okay.
See, it looks like a tank, but it doesn't have tracks.
All right.
You get into the turret here, and you have the 50 caliber gun. And before, we were in a... we had a group of tanks that we were taken somewhere to turn them in to get these vehicles. And here we are driving through the countryside in Germany, and we had about, I think I had about 25 or 30 tanks in my group. And I was I was in a Jeep, and I would go up and check the column and then go back and stay behind the seat, make sure no one drops out. And we're going through this one town, and I happen to be in the back, and I hear over my walkie-talkie, "Sergeant, we have an accident." God. Going through town, you're going down these narrow streets. They're very, very quaint and ancient roads. You're going through town, you make a right turn, go about a block, and you have to make a left turn to continue down this highway.
Okay.
And one of our tank commanders, he must have just been promoted to... he made the right turn, okay, but then when he had to turn left to continue on down, he couldn't turn fast enough. He went right through the front of his house.
Ooh.
And it happened to be on a Sunday, and people were sitting there having their dinner. They're sitting at the dining room table, and the whole front of the house was torn up, and it just... I guess we paid for it. I guess the government paid for it, actually, later on. With this kind of vehicle, it steers just like a car, drives almost like a car, truck rather.
Was the armored car better than the tank? Or?
It was faster, it maneuvered better, but the thing is with the armored car, you can shoot the tires on you with a flat tire and you can't go anywhere. With the tank, the only way they can stop the tank is to shoot the tracks off, which they were very adept at doing. We had what they call bazookas, which we shot at their tanks with, and they had something similar to it. If they aim it right and you knock the track off the bogey wheels, the tank will do nothing but go in circles. If one of them's still going, you're disabled. But armored cars were not built for the field combat. They were built for protection and for fast moving. That's my uncle Al, who died. Doesn't get the date. He was 75 when he died. That's similar to the other picture I had. Here is when we were coming back home. This is at Bremerhaven, Germany. And we were outside this building. They had us dump everything out of our duffel bags and stripped to be searched to make sure we weren't bringing back contraband, like guns and things like that. And this is where also we got paid in American money when we got on the ship. This was this is a Texarkana Victory ship, which we came back on. When I went overseas, I went over on the Queen Elizabeth.
Okay.
And on the Queen Elizabeth were 15,000 troops on one ship. It was what they call only single loaded. They used to double load it before the Battle of the Bulge to get the troops over faster. We had 30,000 on the ship. But when I went over, the Bulge was over already, so it was only 15,000. And Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mary were English ships that they converted from passenger ships to troop ships. And so we were single-loaded, meaning that we got a bunk and we stayed in the bunk all the time. When double-loaded, you're on the bunk from 12 to 12, and the other guys are 12 to 12. You switch. You go up on deck, they come down below. And I was sleeping in the bathtub. I think I'll tell you that.
Because you're so short.
Yeah. Here, the Texarkana Victory is at Bremerhaven. We boarded ship. There's 1,500 soldiers. We were sleeping down in the holds. They had the bunks in the hold, and they were 5 high, and there were 500 each hold in 3 holds. The fourth hold carried rations for the ship, food, what have you, and the 5th hold, the one that was way up in the front, where they were bringing back dead soldiers, bringing back the bodies. So, consequently, when the weather got bad, you wanted to be in the middle hold, because that's when the ship is going like this year, and the fulcrum, do not. Anyhow, we started out here, we left Bremerhaven and went down through the English Channel, around the tip of England, and headed west to the United States. And we were at sea. I would say we had passed Southampton, England, maybe 3 days, and we woke up the next morning. I was with the Sergeant Bob Brow I showed you, and when you wake up on a troop ship, you just don't go back to sleep. You just go up and get some fresh air. Anyhow, we were on the ship, and here we are heading into the sun. And I asked Bob, I said, Bob, where is the sunrise? What do you mean, it's rising in the sky? He said, no. I said, what direction? He said, well, rise in the east. I said, well, which way are we going? He said, we're going east. Then he hesitates. He says, why are we going east? We're going back to Europe. Well, what happened is that they didn't tell us about it. We knew about it. Bob and I just sat there all morning, and nothing was said. All the other guys came up on deck, and they're wandering around. They're playing craft because they have American money now. And finally, the captain got on and says, now hear this. We had an announcement. We're heading back to Southampton. And all the guys are moaning because, gee, they want to get home. We all want to get home. My mother thought I was lost for a month because we went back to Southampton And we couldn't get off the ship because we're quarantined. We already gone through the physical inspection, the search, and everything else, and we couldn't get off the ship. They tied us up at the dock, and we had to wait for another Victory ship to come from Bremerhaven. Pulled up alongside of us, we went from one to the other, and then we continued our trip. It took us 30 days to cross the Atlantic Ocean, from the time we went to Bremerhaven until we got back to the States.
Wow.
My mother thought I was dead or something, because nobody told them. They were very quiet about it. So anyhow, that's the size ship that was basically the big workhorse for the Second World War was the Victory ships. They were built by Kaiser and Fraser, you know, and you made cars afterwards, but they had a big shipbuilding yard over in the state of Washington. But the Queen Elizabeth was nice. I liked it. So here's Bremerhaven. We call it, they call it Bremer. And there's the picture of this on the departed Bremerhaven, Germany, August 1st, 1946. Arrived at Southampton, England, August 10th. Okay, then we departed Southampton, England on the Stevens Victory, it was.
Wow.
And we arrived on August 30th. So from the 1st to the 30th, that's how long it took us. And this is what we looked like on board ship. I used to know where I was. I should have put a circle around like that. I did some of this. But these were professional pictures that they sent us afterward. We gave them $10 or something. We sent to our homes. I wouldn't want to be able to those when they sent them.
Yeah.
There's a little newspaper they put on board ship. There's a Deutschmark. It was occupation money.
Alright.
These are the pictures I carried on my wall. A picture of my house and my family. Okay, so now what do you want to know?
Okay.
Can I get to your questions?
Yeah. You lived in Chicago before the war, right?
Right.
What section?
West side.
West side. What was your date of birth?
August 14th, 1926.
And what did you first think about Hitler and the Axis powers?
When I first found out?
No, what did you first think about them?
Well, I was mad.
Okay.
I think every young man my age, I'd say the majority of them we were very unhappy about being attacked at Pearl Harbor. When the attack was made on Pearl Harbor, I think I was 16 years old.
Okay.
And on that weekend, it was on a Sunday, I was coming back from Palatine, Illinois. No, it was Arlington Heights, coming back to the Northwestern Station in Chicago, and then I would go home on the elevator train.
All right.
And when we got to the station, we heard these. At that time, back then, they used to have extra editions of the newspaper. If you're anywhere downtown, young boys would be out selling the papers, calling out "extra, extra, read all about it."
Okay.
And the station, there must have been 5 or 6 kids like that selling papers, "extra, extra, United States bombed, Hawaii bombed," and my heart sank because picture of my uncle that I just showed you.
Yeah.
He was at Hickam Field in Hawaii
Really?
during that Japanese area. And he's at Schofield Barracks. Hickam Field was the Air Force. He was at Schofield Barracks. He was in the Army. And my thoughts went to him. And we were like brothers because we lived in the same building.
Okay.
And he's, I think he was 6 years older than I was. But he was in the service. He had been in there for quite a while. So that's what I thought about it. I was really, really mad. I would have gone in at 16 if they would have taken me, but I had to wait till I got out of high school. But as far as Hitler was concerned, I started hearing about Hitler, I guess in the early 40s, 39, 40, when he invaded Poland.
All right.
And at that time, there was something going on over there. It was far away. It didn't mean that much. It didn't hit home. In fact, because everyone was always fighting each other over there, and we just thought it was part of history.
Read it.
But then when you started finding out as to what they were up to, what they were doing, I'll tell you one thing. I went into the service. I was 18 years old.
Okay.
And most of the guys I was with were my age group. And we were all just gung-ho. If the captain or the lieutenant says we could do this, we go and do it, and we ask questions later.
All right.
That's the kind of young men they were. And I think that's what probably beat the Axis, is the fact that the younger kids, the younger guys were so intent on doing a good job, whereas their armies consisted of young people, but they also had older people in there.
Yeah.
They had guys in their army that were maybe in their 50s, 40s and 50s, where we were pretty much 30 years old and under. And the only ones who were older than that were probably the generals and the admirals and so forth. And as you get older, you start having second thoughts about doing certain things. You're not as avid about accomplishing the objective. You just sit back a little bit. Anyhow, that was my impression. I went over there with the intention of beating the Axis, and that was pumped into us. War bond sales and everything else. Let's fight fight Tojo, fight Hitler, fight the Axis. The first day I landed in France, and I got to tell you, that was a replacement depot, where replacement troops were showing up to re-man the 106th Infantry Division, which was decimated. And we were dropped off on a 6x6 truck they used to call me, on the back end of the truck, about maybe 2 dozen of us.
Okay.
And we stopped at this depot camp. They said, okay, you guys get off right here. And we got off, and they started assigning us to different tents. And I went into this one tent and got my gear on my cot and all that. And a few guys were out in front of the tent. It was sort of like a circular area in front of these tents, and they were sitting down in front of a fire, which was in a sort of recession in the ground.
Okay.
And they were writing letters on it. And I was out there with them, and I went into the tent to get a pad of paper and a pencil so I could do the same thing. Let my parents know I arrived, and so forth. And when I was in the tent, there was an explosion.
Wow.
And I went outside the tent, and the 3 guys I was sitting with were dead. The fire was built over a bomb crater, an unexploded bomb, and here the fire was right there, and the bomb. So I don't think I was in France more than 12 hours, and I experienced death already. It was so weird.
What were your first feelings about World War II?
Feelings?
Yeah.
Well, as a young man, like I said, I had a good time. I enjoyed the young people I was with. I enjoyed the training. I think it made me grow up. Up until then, I was just wet behind the ears, like they say. But it showed me what was going on in the world, really. Nowadays, I would think a 10-year-old kid knows more about what's going on in the world now than what I did when I was 18.
Yeah.
Usually with the television and everything. But I grew up. I became, a world traveler, and it was a sobering experience. It was real good.
Why did you join? Well, you were drafted because you joined the service,
I was forced to be drafted because they wouldn't take me because I was colorblind. And when I was drafted, every third person was going into the Navy.
Okay.
And the two guys in front of me were checked up as Army, and the guy was just ready to make me Navy. And he saw the red check mark, and he said, "Oh, you have to go in the Army." I said, "Oh, come on!" It still didn't work. Couldn't even get in the submarine service.
Jeez.
I didn't know enough about radio.
Where did you first go? You went to
Fort Sheridan,
Fort Sheridan.
Illinois.
Illinois. And what did you do there? Was basic training?
Well, Fort Sheridan, Illinois, basically what we did, they mustered us into the service. We took our oath to support the country and so on and so forth. They issued us our uniforms, and we took aptitude tests.
Okay.
And the aptitude tests were similar to our IQ tests, you know. They want to be sure that you were properly placed in something you could handle.
Okay.
And when then we had interviews, and I had an interview, and they said, "Soldier, you scored very well, and when you get done with your basic training, you might consider going into officer's training." Because I scored real high on the aptitude. I had a AGCT score, that's Army General Classification Test. I think it was 135. And I don't know what the top mark is or whatever, but anyhow, I was in the upper group, whatever, and I never realized until later on what that meant. Anyhow, I went through basic training, but because of the fact we had the Battle of the Bulge, and they needed troops over there too fast, they just cut our training schedule short, sent us over.
Okay.
So I never got a chance to be in officer's training school. Sometime later, it came up when the war ended, and the way they sent the fellows back home was how much service they had. You got so many points for every month you had in service, and you had so many points for every battle star you had.
Okay.
And the guys with the biggest score went home first. And with my score, since I had not been there, I arrived in Europe in March, and the war ended in June. So I didn't have much of a score, so I knew I was way down the list. And at that time, these guys were going home, and they were setting up this constabulary for us.
Okay.
And we got notice from division headquarters to make a roster of all the people in the outfit, starting with the highest AGCT score first.
Okay.
So there I was, Sergeant Cozza, 135, Captain Wesley E. Williams, he was the company commander, 131. And when he looked at the list, he says, "Hey, come on now, just because you're making the list up, you don't have to put your name down." I said, "Hey, I got the order, sir. Highest score first." He said, "Let me see your record." "How come you're not an officer?" I said, "Don't give me that business." I said, "They told me I would have a chance to go, but then the war, all that, and they needed me here." And he said, "Well, I can get you in the officers candidate school." I said, "Forget about it." He said, "I'll make you top sergeant. Sign up for another 2 years." I says, "Captain, if they want me, you have to get out the bowl again and pull a number out. If my number comes up, maybe I may come." I said, "I want to go back." Anyhow, that was about that score business.
Wow. So where'd you go after that?
After what? After
Fort Sheridan.
Fort Sheridan, Fort McClellan.
Fort McClellan.
McClellan.
Okay.
That's in Alabama.
And what was that? That was more training?
Well, that was the training. We didn't do any training at Fort Sheridan. We just got on the train and went down to Alabama.
Okay.
And we were there, it was supposed to be a 16-week cycle, but we cut it shorter. I think it was 14 weeks.
Okay.
And we got a delay en route leave, they called it. Stop home for a week.
Okay.
And then we went to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. And from there we went overseas.
Where'd you go in Europe?
Well, we boarded the Queen Elizabeth and we got overseas. In 5 days we got over to Scotland.
Okay.
And took a train through Scotland, through England, down to Southampton.
Okay, to England.
And we went to the port of Southampton.
And that's in England, or?
That's in England, yeah.
Okay.
And from there we boarded LSTs,
What's that?
landing ship tanks.
Okay.
We boarded those and we went across the channel
Okay.
to Le Havre, France.
Did you do anything there? Or?
No, I think we stayed there overnight, billeted in tents. Then we got on these trucks and we went to Rennes, France. RENNES. That was the Repo Depot.
Okay. Was there anything special about Ruffle?
No, it's just that they set these places up to as replacement camps for various divisions would have casualties, they needed replacements, and let's say there were 25 men, and then they'll go and they'll send them to that division and so forth. That's basically what they were set up for.
Alright.
And from there we went down to Lorient, France. Lorient, and then Saint-Nazaire. That's two neighboring cities
Okay.
on the coast of France that were submarine bases, German subs. And we served there until the war ended. In fact, these guys in the submarine base, they didn't know the war ended for a month. They didn't believe it, you know.
Yeah.
They kept getting information, and very good. They thought it was an Allied trick that we're trying to tell them that Germany surrendered. They didn't believe it, and I don't know how they finally convinced them, but then they finally put down their arms and were able to move out.
Wow. So, what was your branch and rank in the service at the start and end of the war?
At the start, I was a private. At the end, I was a sergeant.
Sergeant. How long did it take you to get sergeant?
I guess it was about a year.
Really?
Yeah.
How much higher is sergeant over private?
Well, you have private, you have private first class, and then you have corporal, and then you have sergeant.
Why did you?
And they would have made me first sergeant if I would stay, but I didn't want to stay. So. First sergeant, you see, buck sergeant has 3 stripes, there at angles, and then you have a staff sergeant which has 3 stripes and 2 down below, and then you have the first sergeant, 3 stripes down below.
How did you become a sergeant?
Just by hanging around.
Really? Okay.
Plus they needed my organizational skills or something, whatever, to run the company.
What did you think of the uniforms?
Kept me warm.
Really?
Yeah, they, you basically had 2 uniforms, one for casual, which is your battle uniforms, and then you had your ODs, which is your wool.
What
You
is
had your
ODs?
dress jacket and so forth, Iceland jacket.
Okay.
But the casual ones were what you see. Now they haven't, they look like camouflage, but we didn't have camouflage at that time.
Okay. How long were you in the service?
22 months.
2 months. Oh, were there any other family members in the war?
So my uncle,
Who's at Pearl Harbor, right?
Yeah. I had a lot of cousins who were in service.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't have a brother at that time, so we were not in the service.
Did you meet any famous people? No.
I don't think so.
Did the war have any immediate effects on you?
No. It had effects on me later because having been in the service, they passed the GI Bill of Rights, the Congress did. And that, based on the amount of time you had in the service, you got so much education subsidized. The GI Bill of Rights gave us, I believe it paid me $50 a month when I was in college, and it paid my tuition.
Wow.
And I went to DePaul University. But I only had enough credit for 3 years of college.
Okay.
And I had to try to figure out how I can get my college education in the 3 years, so I went right through summer school and all. And in one semester, in summer school I carried 12 hours each summer, and because their whatchamacallit was based on a year, not on months.
Okay.
And so I had enough time to do 3 years, and I took 12 hours in the summertime. In my last semester, I had to take 21 hours. And most people were taking just 18 hours, and I had to take 21. Plus, I had just come out of summer school. Plus, I was working half a day each day. I had a job at Encyclopedia Britannica. It worked out fine.
Okay.
Without the GI Bill, I don't think I ever would have gone to college. My folks could not afford it.
Wow. What did you do for entertainment over in Europe?
Well, they had the USO clubs.
Okay.
They had little bands, they had ping pong tables, they had recreational facilities. We had sports. We played softball. They didn't know what a 16-inch softball was because that's indigenous to the Chicago area.
Okay.
And we had 12-inch softballs. And so we sent away back home, we then sent us out some 16-inch softballs. Actually, 16-inch softball is harder game than the 12-inch softball because the 12-inch you have gloves.
Yeah.
16-inch you get a brand new ball, it'll break your knuckles when you catch it.
Yeah.
So we had those facilities, the USO clubs and the athletic facilities and writing letters. Towards the end there, we would get a check out a Jeep and go for a ride.
Really?
This one time, my friend and I, Bob, we took a Jeep. It was on a Sunday, and we decided to go down to Stuttgart, Germany. We're on the Autobahn. And for some reason, we turned off on one of the ramps to go down a small road.
Okay.
Just to get a view of the countryside. And we got ourselves lost. Just temporarily.
Yeah.
And we stopped at some farmer and asked him which way was the Autobahn. He says, Autobahn. He never heard of it.
Really?
Yeah, he was one of these guys who natives of the country, and never left home. He never left home. I don't know what he thought when the war was going on, with all the planes going overhead and all that, but anyhow, we found our way back to the Autobahn. It was a nice drive. The thing is, we had to be careful. I might have told you at one time about the Jeeps. We had to put bars up in front of off the bumper, where they welded the bar to the bumper going vertically
Okay.
with the hook on it, because during the war, the Germans would put wires across the road.
Oh, okay.
And with the Jeeps, you were able to drop the windshield down if you wanted to. You know, and a lot of times you did because if it was hot and you wanted to breeze. And they decapitated a lot of soldiers that way. So they put these bars up there with the hook on so it'll break the wire before.
Wow.
But we weren't concerned about that because we were out in the farm now. There's any trees around.
How's the weather usually?
Well, the weather over there was similar to what it is here.
Okay.
When we were in the tents, it was mostly miserable. When we were in the house, it was fine. We bivouacked in the Black Forest for about a month, I think it was.
Did you take over those houses, or?
Well, we came back.
Okay.
We just took them over temporarily just for the winter.
Okay. How are the men in your platoon?
Basically, like I was, teenagers. We got the war over. We wanted to go home. We didn't want to stay around. Basically, I'd say 75% of the guys in my outfit were my age.
Okay.
All young boys.
Were they tolerable?
Well, my thing is, you have these boys from different parts of the country,
Yeah.
and they had different cultures. You get the southern boys who had one way of thinking, and the northern boys were a little more adventurous. And the southern boys took things a little easier, I guess, but they had tempers. In basic training, we had one guy in basic training never wore shoes in his life.
Really?
And when he got in the army, they gave him shoes, naturally, and he was in the infantry, he had to have shoes.
Mm-hmm.
First thing he did when he got back to the barracks, take off his shoes. We had one guy in our outfit in France that got so drunk he was out of his mind. He was all ready to shoot a black soldier who was with the French girl. And at that time, you didn't have black on white. This guy was going to take care of that black boy, and we had to jump him and take his gun away from him and get him back and sober him up.
Wow.
But the cultures there just, mainly, all of them we were just out of high school. We really were on an adventure.
So you bonded well?
Oh yeah, very nice. You always have some guys who are operators, you know.
Yeah.
Some guys can get anything. They can find it someplace, and other guys. We have one guy, if somebody wanted blue shoes or something like that, boots, for example. This one guy found out where to have some leather boots made. And I didn't smoke. I used my cigarettes to barter. And I got myself a Kodak camera.
Okay.
With my cigarettes. It was different. You're learning how to get along with people, learning how to operate.